Hello there. I am Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you've probably heard of me and my many accomplishments in the civil rights movement, particularly. I was born on Tuesday, January 15th, 1929, in my home in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, I already had an older sister, Christine, and my parents, who were Alberta Williams King and Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. Now, both my grandfather and great-grandfather were also ministers, making me the fourth in line to pursue this faith. This calling did not come easily, however. It wasn't until my undergraduate years at Atlanta Morehouse College in the mid-1940s that Morehouse President Benjamin E. Mays influenced my spiritual development. I began to view Christianity as the power of belief, as a potential force for progressive social change. Here, I began my fight in the civil rights movement. From the years 1955 to my death in 1968, I remained a leader in this great movement for social change and equality. I drew upon my faith and teachings in leading nonviolent protests and movements. People now regard me as one of the greatest nonviolent leaders in world history. Leading up to my time in St. Augustine, I became president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCC, in 1957. I held this position of honor until my untimely death. It was with this great people that the civil rights movement gained momentum. In 1963, I was jailed in Birmingham, Alabama, considered the most segregated city in America. I, alongside countless others, engaged in nonviolent campaigns. We were subsequently assaulted by dogs and water hoses. Here, I wrote the historic piece, Letter from Birmingham Jail, where I put down on paper my thoughts and frustrations with America and its people. After this endeavor, I found myself in Washington as a force behind the March on Washington. We were over 250,000 people strong, rallying in the National Mall. My famous I Have a Dream speech occurred here, inspiring social change. I then traveled to St. Augustine as my final stop. However, there are little records of my visit, as I traveled under the radar as my life was in danger. On June 7th, I was staying in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Canwright. When the home was shot at in a drive-by, I only moved to this home after fearing for my life in my prior residence. Here in St. Augustine, I engaged in several civil rights protests and even spent a night in jail after being arrested on the steps of the Monson Motor Lodge just a few days after the attempted assassination. It was from the help of these events that the Civil Rights Act found itself in Congress. The following year, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, but I knew there was still more room for change. A year later, and the Voting Rights Act was passed. I still yearned for more equality and shifted my focus to economic justice. It was during this fight that I tragically lost the battle and was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee.